Look closely at the face of an ancient Greek or Roman statue. Really look. Notice the cracks, the chips, the missing limbs, the wear of centuries carved by wind and rain. And yet, despite all this, what do you see in those eyes? Not despair, not defeat, but something far more remarkable. An unshakable calm, a quiet dignity that refuses to be broken. It's as if these marble figures, frozen in time, hold a secret, a lesson in how to endure. That's no accident. These sculptures weren't just meant to capture beauty, they were meant to embody an ideal. The Stoic ideal. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And that's exactly what these statues whisper to us across the ages. They stand unmoved, not because they've never faced storms, but because they've learned to withstand them. Think about it. When you walk through a museum, you're not just seeing art, you're standing in the presence of silent teachers. These sculptures don't just depict gods and heroes, they model how to live. The slight curve of a shoulder, the set of a jaw, the stillness of a gaze. Each detail is a masterclass in emotional mastery, in accepting what cannot be changed, in finding strength in surrender. The Stoics called this apatheia, not the absence of feeling, but the mastery of it. And these figures, even in their brokenness, radiate that very quality. They remind us that true resilience isn't about avoiding damage, it's about wearing your scars with grace. So what can these ancient stones teach us today? More than you might think. Over the next few minutes, we'll uncover the hidden blueprint of Stoicism etched into these timeless works, how they teach us to confront chaos with composure, to embrace impermanence without fear, and to find stillness even when the world feels like it's crumbling. Because here's the truth, you don't need to be carved from marble to embody these principles. You just need to pay attention to the lessons left behind by those who were. So let's begin. Let's look deeper, not just at the art, but at the wisdom it holds. Notice how these figures stand unshaken, as if rooted in wisdom. Their weight is evenly distributed, their spines straight but not rigid, their shoulders relaxed yet purposeful. There's no tension in their hands, no frantic energy in their stance. They simply are, grounded in a way that feels almost superhuman. But here's the secret, that posture isn't just artistic flair. It's a visual manifesto of Stoic philosophy. The Stoics believed the body and mind were inseparable, that how you hold yourself shapes how you hold your thoughts. Seneca put it perfectly, stand like a rock against which the waves of emotion break in vain. These sculptures are that rock frozen in marble. Now contrast that with how we move through the modern world. Slouched over screens, shoulders hunched against stress, legs bouncing with restless energy. Our bodies mirror our mental clutter, but the Stoics knew something we've forgotten. Composure isn't passive. It's a deliberate act of defiance against chaos. When you straighten your spine, you're not just adjusting your posture, you're signaling to your mind that you're in command. That's why Marcus Aurelius practiced standing like a soldier, even in private, why Epictetus taught his students to walk as if every step were a statement. Their bodies were their first line of defense against disorder. Try this. The next time you feel overwhelmed, pause and observe how you're standing. Are you leaning into anxiety or anchoring yourself against it? The statues don't fight their circumstances, they transcend them. A missing arm doesn't make them falter. A weathered face doesn't steal their dignity. They embody the Stoic truth. Mastery begins with the simplest choices: how you stand, how you breathe, how you meet the world without flinching. So take a lesson from marble. Plant your feet, lift your chin, and let your posture remind you calm isn't the absence of storm, it's the stillness at its center, eyes in marble sea beyond chaos. Look at the unbroken stare of an ancient bust, how those hollow pupils seem to pierce right through time itself. There's no flinching, no distraction, just an unwavering focus, as if the sculptor chiseled not just stone but clarity itself. That gaze isn't empty, it's deliberate. It mirrors the Stoic practice of prosoph, the art of attention, of seeing the world without the filter of panic or desire. Epictetus put it bluntly, it's not what happens to you but how you interpret it that matters. These statues with their steady eyes are frozen mid-thought, mid-discernment, reminding us that perception is the first battleground of wisdom. Take The Thinker by Rodin, though not ancient, it carries the same legacy. Notice how his eyes aren't darting or glazed over, they're fixed, heavy with contemplation. Now compare that to how we navigate today, screens flickering, notifications pinging, our attention fractured into a dozen directions. The Stoics would have called this amathia, the folly of distraction, the enemy of clear judgment. Because here's the truth those marble eyes know, when your gaze is scattered, so is your mind. But when you learn to focus like chiseled stone, you begin to see things as they are, not as your fears or cravings paint them. So when did you last pause to truly observe, not glance, not skim, but see? The Stoics practiced this daily, what Marcus Aurelius called stripping away the story to confront raw reality. Imagine standing before a challenge with the clarity of those sculpted eyes, not denying pain, not ignoring injustice, but refusing to let either distort your vision. That's the power of the unflinching gaze. It doesn't ignore the storm, it sees through it, and in that seeing finds the calm to act or the wisdom to wait. Cracks in marble aren't flaws, they're stories. Every chip, every missing finger, every weathered surface whispers the same truth. Time touches everything, but it doesn't have to break you. Look at the Venus de Milo, armless, yet more powerful for her incompleteness, or the Belvedere torso, a fragment that inspired Michelangelo to see wholeness in what others called ruin. These sculptures don't hide their scars, they wear them as proof of endurance, and that's the heart of amor fati, the Stoic practice of loving fate, not in spite of its twists but because of them. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly, the universe is transformation, life is opinion. In other words, change is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Think of a statue left outdoors for centuries. Rain erodes its edges, wind smooths its features, yet somehow it becomes more striking with age, not because it's untouched, but because it's been tested. That's the paradox these sculptures teach us. True beauty isn't frozen perfection, it's the quiet dignity of adaptation. The Stoics didn't just tolerate life's unpredictability, they revered it. Like a sculptor working with flawed stone, they saw every setback as raw material for wisdom. Epictetus, born a slave, crippled by a cruel master, later wrote, "Difficulty shows what men are." These statues, cracked but unbroken, are his words made visible. Now turn that lens on your own life. What scars have made you wiser? A failed venture that taught resilience. A loss that revealed what truly matters. The Stoics would say those aren't wounds to resent, they're the marks of a life fully lived. Just as a statue's patina tells of storms weathered, your experiences, however painful, are the texture of your strength. Seneca urged his students to welcome every hardship as the sculptor welcomes the chisel. Because here's the secret those marble teachers know, you aren't defined by what happens to you, but by how you let it shape you. So the next time you face a fracture, a plan undone, a dream deferred, remember the statues. They stand as reminders that time's touch isn't theft, it's transformation. Amor fati isn't passive resignation, it's active reverence for the process. The cracks aren't failures, they're the places where the light gets in. Silence carved in stone speaks volumes. Look at the lips of any classical statue, closed, serene, with the faintest hint of a knowing curve. Not a single word escapes them, yet their message is unmistakable. Restraint isn't suppression, it's precision. These sculpted mouths embody the Stoic discipline of measured speech, where every syllable is weighed before it's released. Seneca called speech the mirror of the soul, and these silent figures reflect a soul in perfect harmony with itself. They remind us that words aren't just sounds, they're actions, carrying the weight of consequences. Consider the modern world, where words spill endlessly: social media oversharing, reactive rants, the compulsive need to fill every quiet space with noise. Contrast that with the Stoic ideal, speech as deliberate as a chisel strike. Epictetus warned, if you pour a glut of water into a tiny cup, most of it will spill away. The same is true of words. The statues teach us that silence isn't emptiness, it's the space where wisdom gathers. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you," he wasn't just talking about events, he was talking about the stories we attach to them, the unnecessary words that amplify chaos. Think of a time silence served you better than speech. Maybe it was biting back a harsh reply, or choosing not to gossip, or simply listening when your instinct was to interrupt. That's the power these marble lips hold. They model the Stoic truth. Mastery over speech isn't about saying less, it's about meaning more. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can listen twice as much as we speak." The statues, frozen in their eloquent quiet, are that principle made visible. So next time you speak, ask yourself, is this necessary? Is it kind? Is it true? The Stoics didn't advocate silence for its own sake, but for the clarity it brings. Like a sculptor who removes excess stone to reveal the form within, they taught us to carve away unnecessary words, leaving only what's essential. Because sometimes the most profound truths aren't spoken at all. They're held in the stillness, waiting to be heard. Marble muscles aren't just art, they're aspirations. Look at the sinews of Hercules, the tension in his stone limbs, the way his carved veins seem to pulse with effort. That's no accident. The sculptors weren't just showing strength, they were mapping the Stoic path to resilience. Because here's the truth, every chiseled torso, every defined shoulder, is a testament to discipline, the kind that doesn't just shape bodies, but fortifies minds. Epictetus, who knew a thing or two about hardship, put it plainly, difficulties show what men are. And what do these statues show us? That strength isn't given, it's earned. Layer by layer, blow by blow, like marble yielding to the sculptor's mallet. Consider the athlete, not the modern celebrity, but the ancient competitor who trained in dust and daylight. Their bodies weren't sculpted in gyms, they were forged in struggle. No shortcuts, no comforts, just relentless repetition. The Stoics saw this as the perfect metaphor for character. You don't become unshakable by avoiding weight, but by lifting it. Marcus Aurelius would rise before dawn to wrestle, not just to hone his body, but to remind himself that growth comes through resistance. The statues capture this truth in frozen motion. The discus thrower mid-rotation, the boxer poised to strike. Their muscles aren't just displays of power, they're proof of persistence. Now, think of your own life. What challenge forged your strength? Maybe it was a failure that taught you grit, a responsibility that demanded more than you thought you had, or simply the daily grind of showing up when you'd rather step back. The Stoics would call these your training grounds, because resilience isn't a trait you're born with, it's a skill you carve into yourself, one deliberate strike at a time. Like a sculptor chiseling away excess stone, you remove what's weak, what's unnecessary, until only your best self remains. That's the deeper lesson in those marble muscles. They're not frozen in perfection, but in progress. The tension in their limbs isn't just aesthetic, it's allegory. Every ridge and contour whispers the same truth: strength isn't the absence of struggle, but the result of it. So next time you face a weight, literal or metaphorical, remember, you're not being burdened, you're being sculpted. Stone fabric seems to float, why can't we? Look at the way marble drapery cascades down a statue's shoulders, light as breath, untouched by gravity's pull. There's a deliberate contradiction here: hard stone carved to look weightless, rigid material made to appear fluid. And that's exactly the point. These flowing robes aren't just artistic skill, they're visual metaphors for the Stoic art of detachment. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events," and these sculptures embody that truth in every fold. The robes don't cling, they let go. They're reminders that burdens aren't in the world, they're in our grip on it. Now contrast that with modern life. Our closets overflow with unworn clothes, our phones with unread messages, our schedules with unnecessary commitments. We confuse accumulation with security, busyness with purpose. But the Stoics knew better. Seneca warned, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." The statue's draped fabric whispers the same lesson. True freedom isn't in possessing, but in releasing. Think of Hercules shedding the Nemean lion's pelt after his labor. The moment he removes it, he's unburdened, ready for the next challenge. The robe doesn't make the hero, the ability to lay it down does. So ask yourself, what weight could you lay down? Not just physical clutter, but the mental kind: grudges you've carried too long, outcomes you're white-knuckling, expectations that no longer serve you. The Stoics called this apatheia, not indifference, but the clarity that comes when you stop mistaking attachments for anchors. Like those stone robes, you were never meant to be weighed down. Here's the paradox these sculptures understand. The tighter you grasp, the heavier life feels. But when you loosen your hold on status, on control, on the illusion of permanence, you start to move through the world like marble drapery, unburdened, undisturbed, flowing with circumstance rather than fighting it. Epictetus, born into slavery, knew this intimately. Freedom isn't secured by filling your purse, he said, but by emptying your wants. The statues model this with their effortless folds, their fabric forever caught in the act of letting go. Next time you feel the crush of accumulation, whether it's possessions, obligations, or worries, remember the stone robes. They don't resist the wind, they move with it. They don't fear the storm, they let it pass through. That's the secret hidden in their folds. Lightness isn't about having less, it's about needing less. And that's a choice available to you in every moment, no chisel required. Venus de Milo's arms are gone, yet she endures, not despite her missing limbs, but through them. That's the paradox these fragmented sculptures teach us. True resilience isn't measured by what's intact, but by how we embody what remains. Epictetus, who knew loss intimately, first as a slave, then as an exile, wrote, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for what he has not, but rejoices in what he has." The Venus de Milo doesn't mourn her absent arms. She transcends them, her grace undiminished, her power undiluted. She stands as a testament to the Stoic truth. Wholeness isn't about perfection, it's about perspective. Consider the Belvedere torso, a fragment that inspired Michelangelo to see beyond the broken surface. He called it a teacher of the impossible, not because it was complete, but because it revealed how beauty and meaning persist even in ruin. The Stoics would have recognized this immediately. Their philosophy wasn't about denying loss, it was about redefining it. When Marcus Aurelius lost 9 of his children to illness and war, he didn't turn away from grief. he transformed it into fuel for wisdom, writing, "The obstacle becomes the way." These statues, with their silent absences, echo that same alchemy. Now turn that lens inward. What have you lost, and what have you discovered in its place? Maybe a failed dream taught you resilience, or a shattered expectation revealed a strength you didn't know you had. The Stoics called this eustatheia, the art of finding equilibrium amid upheaval. Like a tree that grows stronger roots after a storm, we don't just survive loss, we adapt around it, letting absence carve new spaces for growth. The Venus de Milo's missing arms didn't weaken her legacy, they made it universal. Suddenly, she wasn't just a goddess, she was every person who'd ever faced limitation and found a way to stand tall. So next time you're tempted to fixate on what's gone, remember the partial sculptures. They don't ask for pity, they command respect, not because they're unbroken, but because they've mastered the Stoic art of focus, redirecting attention from what's missing to what's possible. Epictetus, who walked with a limp from his master's cruelty, put it plainly, "Lameness is an impediment to the leg, but not to the will." These statues, frozen in their dignified incompleteness, prove his point. They remind us you don't need to be whole to be mighty. You just need to embrace what remains and let it be enough. Alone doesn't mean lonely in Stoic art. Look at the solitary figures. Think of the dying Gaul, slumped in his final moments, or the boxer at rest, weary but unbowed. These statues stand apart, yet they radiate a quiet completeness. There's no desperation in their isolation, no hunger for an audience. They're emblems of a radical idea. That wholeness isn't found outside yourself, but within. Seneca, who wrote volumes on the power of solitude, put it plainly, "Retire into yourself as much as possible." He wasn't advocating escape. He was teaching excavation, the art of digging deep enough to discover you were never empty to begin with. Now contrast that with modern life, where being alone is often framed as a problem to solve. We fill silence with podcasts, solitude with scrolling, as if stillness were a void to fear. But the Stoics knew better. They saw solitude as a forge, a place where the self is tested, refined, and ultimately strengthened. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire, still carved out time to sit with his own thoughts, writing, "Nowhere can a person find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own mind." These lone statues, frozen in their self-contained dignity, are that retreat made visible. They don't just endure solitude, they embody its gifts. Think of a time you were truly alone, not just physically, but mentally untethered from distractions. Maybe it was a long walk, an unexpected quiet hour, or a moment of crisis when no one else could shoulder the weight. What did you discover in that space? The Stoics believed those were the moments when we meet ourselves most honestly. Epictetus, born into bondage, knew this intimately. First learn the meaning of what you say, and then speak. In other words, solitude isn't emptiness, it's the classroom where we learn our own language. These solitary figures, whether warrior or thinker, model a truth we've forgotten. Being alone isn't a lack of connection, it's a different kind of connection. To yourself, to your principles, to the quiet voice that gets drowned out in the noise of the crowd. The boxer at rest isn't waiting for applause, he's reconciled with his own exhaustion. The dying Gaul isn't pleading for pity, he's owning his fate. They remind us that the strongest bonds are often the ones we forge in solitude, the unshakable knowledge that, no matter what comes, we carry within us everything we need. So the next time you find yourself alone, resist the urge to reach for a screen or a distraction. Sit with it, listen. These statues didn't become timeless by clinging to the crowd, they endured by standing apart. And somewhere in that space between solitude and strength, you might just find what the Stoics promised, not loneliness but liberation. Not a single scream is carved in stone. Look at the faces of these ancient statues, no gritted teeth, no furrowed brows, no contorted rage, just serenity etched in marble, as if the sculptors knew something we've forgotten. Anger is the easiest emotion to carve, but the hardest to live with. Seneca called it temporary madness, a fire that burns the hand that holds it. And yet, in our modern world, outrage has become a currency, viral, addictive, rewarded with attention. The Stoics offered a radical alternative, not suppression but mastery. They understood what these calm faces embody, that anger doesn't prove your strength, it betrays your leverage. Take the Laocoon group, writhing in agony as serpents coil around him. Even in torment, his face isn't twisted with rage. It's a mask of focused suffering, as if he's channeling pain into purpose rather than letting it erupt into chaos. That's the Stoic distinction. Emotion isn't the enemy, but unbridled reaction is. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "How much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it." These statues, frozen in their quiet intensity, are that principle made visible. They don't deny struggle, they refuse to let it degrade them. Now, think of the last time anger hijacked your judgment. Maybe it was a petty slight that ballooned into a feud, or a headline that sent you spiraling into indignation. The Stoics would ask, what did that fury build? What did it fix? Contrast that with the bust of Antinous, his gaze steady, his lips parted just enough to suggest breath, not bitterness. He models the alternative, the pause between stimulus and response where wisdom lies. Seneca urged his students to take a step back when anger flared, to let the heat dissipate before acting. These faces, carved centuries ago, are that pause immortalized. So here's a challenge. What rage could you transmute today? Not ignore, not suppress, but alchemize into clarity, into action, or even into quiet release. The statues don't preach perfection, they offer proof that it's possible to face injustice without mirroring its chaos, to endure provocation without surrendering your peace. Like marble, we're shaped by pressure, but unlike stone, we get to choose whether it hardens us or hollows us. The next time anger rises, remember the silent faces. They stand as witnesses to a truth we need now more than ever. Stillness isn't surrender, it's strength under control, and that's a masterpiece worth chiseling every day. Every statue needs a stand. What's yours? Look closely at the base of any classical sculpture, the unadorned block of marble or bronze that holds the figure upright. It's easy to overlook, but without it, even the most breathtaking masterpiece would topple. That's not just physics, it's philosophy. The Stoics understood that greatness isn't just about what you achieve, but what you stand upon. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. In other words, your pedestal isn't an accessory, it's your foundation. The virtues you choose to root yourself in determine whether you sway with every wind or stand firm when storms come. Think of the people who have shaped your life: parents, mentors, historical figures. They're not just influences, they're human pedestals offering stability when your own footing feels unsure. The Stoics called these guiding principles arete excellence of character. Like the plinths beneath statues, these ideals don't shout for attention. They simply do their job, holding you upright when the world tries to knock you down. Consider Epictetus, who rose from slavery to become one of history's greatest teachers. His pedestal wasn't wealth or status, it was an unshakable commitment to self-mastery. When his master broke his leg, he reportedly said, "You will lame the body, but not the will." That's the power of a well-chosen foundation. Now turn the lens inward. What virtues ground you? Is it integrity that keeps you steady when shortcuts tempt you? Resilience that helps you rise after failure? Compassion that anchors your decisions when others lash out? The Stoics weren't prescribing a single answer, they were urging us to choose consciously. Seneca wrote, "If one does not know to which port one is sailing, no wind is favorable." Your pedestal is your true north, the non-negotiable principles that ensure you don't drift when chaos hits. Here's the challenge these silent stone bases pose: stability isn't passive. It's a daily practice. Like a sculptor smoothing rough edges, you refine your foundation through action, choosing honesty over convenience, courage over comfort, wisdom over reaction. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, taught that virtue isn't a theory, it's a way of walking through the world. Your pedestal isn't what you say matters, it's what you do when no one's watching. So next time you see a statue, don't just admire the figure, study the base. Then ask yourself, is your foundation as solid as marble, or are you standing on shifting sand? The answer might just determine how tall you stand when life pushes back. Perfectly imperfect, like Stoic progress, look closely at any classical statue, and you'll notice something surprising. The left side rarely mirrors the right. A shoulder sits slightly higher, a hip tilts subtly forward, a curl of hair defies symmetry. These aren't mistakes, they're masterstrokes. The sculptors knew what the Stoics taught. Life isn't calibrated for balance, but for movement. Epictetus put it plainly, "Seek not for events to happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do." In other words, harmony isn't found in forcing perfection. It's found in embracing the natural order of things, asymmetries and all. Take the Discobolus mid-throw, his body a study in controlled imbalance. Every muscle, every tendon is carved to show the strain of motion. The way his torso twists, his weight shifts, his fingers grip the discus just off-center. If he were perfectly symmetrical, he'd look frozen, lifeless, but those deliberate flaws, they're what make him dynamic. The Stoics called this eusymmetria beauty in purposeful imbalance. It's the same reason a tree grows gnarled branches toward sunlight, or a river carves crooked paths through stone. Nature's wisdom lies in adapting, not conforming. Now think of your own asymmetries, the quirks you've been taught to hide. A laugh that's too loud, a passion that doesn't fit neatly into a resume, a scar that tells a story you'd rather forget. What if those weren't flaws to fix but features to honor? Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That's the secret these statues whisper. Your so-called imperfections aren't obstacles to your strength, they're the contours of it. Consider the spinario, the boy pulling a thorn from his foot. His posture isn't noble or poised, it's human. Bent over, one leg awkwardly crossed, his face tight with discomfort. And yet, this is the statue Renaissance artists studied to learn anatomy. Why? Because real grace isn't about hiding struggle. It's about revealing how we meet it. The Stoics didn't preach invulnerability, they practiced authenticity. Seneca, who battled chronic illness, wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." The spinario's crooked spine isn't a defect, it's a testament. So here's a question to carry with you. What flaw have you been fighting that might actually be your fingerprint? The slight stutter that makes people lean in to listen. The restless mind that spots connections others miss. The heart that feels too deeply. These aren't cracks in your marble, they're the marks of a sculpture only you could be. The next time you're tempted to compare yourself to some airbrushed ideal, remember the statues. Their power lies not in their polish, but in their humanity. And so does yours. Why do so many statues look slightly down, not in shame, not in defeat, but with intentional modesty, as if the weight of their gaze could teach us something about the weight of our egos? That downward tilt isn't accidental. It's a visual manifesto of humility, a stoic rebuttal to the chest-puffing grandiosity that so often masquerades as strength. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly, you're just a soul carrying a corpse. In other words, no matter how high you rise, you're still flesh and bone, temporary, fragile, and utterly unremarkable in the grand scheme. The statues know this. Their lowered eyes aren't avoiding the world, they're seeing it clearly. Take the Apollo Belvedere, his head inclined just enough to suggest contemplation, not confrontation. Or the Doraphoros, whose gaze rests slightly below the horizon, as if measuring his steps rather than his stature. These aren't poses of submission, they're masterclasses in perspective. The Stoics called this praeots the quiet strength of humility, the wisdom to know that true power doesn't need to announce itself. Contrast that with today's social media arenas, where every achievement demands a spotlight, every opinion requires amplification. The statues whisper an antidote. Brilliance doesn't dim when it stops performing. Think of a time humility shielded you. Maybe it was biting back the urge to correct someone unnecessarily, or choosing silence over the petty satisfaction of winning an argument. The Stoics would call that not weakness, but warfare, a strategic retreat from the battlefield of ego. Epictetus, born into bondage, knew this intimately. It's impossible to learn what you think you already know. Those downcast eyes in marble, they're not missing the view. They're studying the ground to ensure their footing. Here's the paradox these sculptures understand. The lower you look, the higher you rise. Not because you're shrinking, but because you're rooted. Like a tree that grows tallest when its roots dig deepest, humility isn't about making yourself small. It's about making your foundation unshakable. Seneca wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, but neither can it shine if it's always turning itself toward the light." So the next time you're tempted to clamor for attention, remember the statues. Their power doesn't come from straining upward, but from standing firm. Their eyes aren't lowered in defeat, they're focused on what truly lasts. And in that focus, they teach us the hardest lesson of all. Greatness doesn't need to be seen to be real. Clenched fists can't hold marble or peace. Look at the hands of classical statues, those gracefully relaxed fingers, palms slightly open as if caught mid-breath. There's no tension in their grip, no white-knuckled resistance, just effortless presence. These sculpted hands aren't idle. They are emblematic of a radical Stoic truth. Control is an illusion, but trust is a choice. Seneca put it plainly, fate leads the willing, drags the unwilling. These marble hands, forever at ease, are the visual echo of that surrender, not to passivity, but to partnership with the unfolding moment. Consider the charioteer of Delphi, his reins loose yet deliberate, his fingers draped over them like a musician's over strings. He's not yanking or forcing, he's guiding, responding. That's the heart of Stoic flow, the art of directing without demanding, of navigating without strangling the journey in overplanning. Contrast that with modern life, where we death grip our routines, our expectations, even our devices, as if squeezing tighter could ward off uncertainty. The statues whisper a paradox. The firmer you clutch, the less you actually hold. Think of a river. You can't grasp water, not really. Try to seize it and it slips through your fingers. But cup your hands gently and suddenly you're holding something without strain. That's the wisdom in these sculpted palms. They model eukarya, the Stoic practice of meeting the moment as it is, not as you wish it to be. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The universe is change, life is opinion." In other words, resistance doesn't stop the current, it just exhausts the swimmer. Now turn that lens inward. What are you gripping too tightly right now? A 5-year plan that's crumbling at the edges, a grudge that's long outlived its purpose, the illusion that you can micromanage chaos. The Stoics would urge you to ask, what's the cost of that grip? Not just in energy, but in missed possibilities, the opportunities that can't land in a clenched fist. Here's the challenge these stone hands pose. Uncurl your fingers just a little, not to abandon agency, but to reclaim it. Because here's the secret hidden in their relaxed curves: true power isn't in domination. It's in the courage to let go. Some pedestals stand empty, and so will we. Walk through any museum, and you'll spot them bases where statues once stood, now bare, the stone worn smooth by time's indifferent touch. These gaps aren't accidents, they're deliberate whispers of Memento Mori, the Stoic practice of remembering mortality. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire, wrote in his private journal, "Think of yourself as dead." You have lived your life, not as morbid fixation, but as liberation. The empty plinths mirror our own temporary place here for a moment, then gone, leaving only the imprint of how we stood while we could. Consider how modern culture flees from this truth. We sanitize death, hide aging, fill our calendars with distractions to outrun the clock, but the Stoics leaned into it. They kept skulls on their desks, not to despair, but to distill life to its essence. Like a sculptor chipping away excess marble to reveal the form within, Memento Mori strips away trivialities, leaving only what's vital. Seneca put it sharply, "You act like mortals in all you fear, and like immortals in all you desire." The empty pedestal asks, if this were your last day, would you be clutching the same worries, chasing the same hollow victories? Now imagine your own plinth, not in some distant future, but now today. What would you carve into it? Not the achievements you've collected, but the integrity you've lived. Not the hours logged, but the moments fully inhabited. The Stoics didn't preach grim resignation, they offered fierce urgency. Epictetus, born a slave, knew life could be snatched at any moment. While you kiss your child good night, whisper to yourself, "Tomorrow you may die," not to sour the sweetness, but to sanctify it. That's the alchemy of the empty base. It turns time from enemy to ally, scarcity into focus. Here's the challenge these silent plinths pose: live as if your pedestal is already empty. Not with reckless abandon, but with ruthless clarity. The meetings that don't matter, cancel them. The grudges you're hauling, drop them. The love you've postponed, speak it, because the marble doesn't mourn its missing statue, it testifies to what once stood tall. And so will you, not in the weight of years, but in the depth of your presence. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think." The empty space isn't a threat, it's an invitation. Stand here fully while you still can. Figures side by side, yet each unmoved. Look at the group statues of antiquity, the three graces, their arms intertwined yet expression serene. The Borghese gladiators, locked in combat but faces composed. These aren't just artistic compositions, they're frozen lessons in Stoic cosmopolitanism, the art of existing together without losing yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "We're born for cooperation, like feet or hands." But here's the nuance: cooperation doesn't mean dissolution. The graces don't melt into one another, they complement. The gladiators don't mirror each other's frenzy, they meet force with focus. That's the balance these stone collectives model, community without chaos. Now, contrast that with modern crowds shoulder to shoulder yet miles apart, faces lit by screens, attention fractured into 1,000 directions. The Stoics would call this syncroses, mixing without uniting, because true connection isn't about proximity, it's about presence. Think of a symphony. Every instrument plays a distinct part, but the harmony emerges from listening, not drowning each other out. The group statues embody this principle. Their stillness isn't isolation, it's the quiet confidence of knowing your center while standing shoulder to shoulder with others. Who helps you stay grounded? Not the people who pull you into their storms, but those who anchor you without suffocation. the ones who, like these marble figures, offer connection without demand, support without entanglement. Epictetus, who taught in the crowded streets of Rome, knew this intimately. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish. In other words, the right community doesn't pressure you to perform, it gives you space to grow. There's a reason these group statues endure. They remind us that harmony isn't about uniformity. It's about finding your own unshakable core and letting others do the same. Like roots of neighboring trees, they tangle underground but stand tall above. The Stoics called this sympatheia, the interdependence of all things, not loss of self, but elevation of it. So next time you're in a crowd, ask yourself, are you just filling space, or are you standing like marble, rooted, resonant, and remarkably yourself? Michelangelo saw angels in marble. What's in you? Look at the unfinished sculptures scattered through museums, those raw blocks with just a hint of a face emerging, an arm half revealed. These aren't failures, they're frozen moments of becoming. The Stoics would have recognized them immediately, not as abandoned projects, but as mirrors of the human condition. We're all works in progress, rough edges and all. Epictetus, who spent his life chiseling wisdom from hardship, put it plainly, no man is free who is not master of himself. In other words, freedom isn't a destination. It's the daily act of carving away what no longer serves you. Think of those abandoned New Year's resolutions gathering dust in your mind, the gym membership unused, the language app untouched. Why do they falter? Not for lack of desire, but because we mistake transformation for a single strike of the chisel when it's really 10,000. The unfinished statues teach us this. Mastery isn't about dramatic leaps, but patient, persistent strokes. Take Michelangelo's prisoners, forever straining to break free from their marble confines. They're not stuck, they're evolving, each groove a testament to the sculptor's patience and his willingness to let the stone guide him. That's the Stoic art of progress, measured not in polished perfection, but in honest effort. Now turn that lens inward. What part of you is still rough stone? Maybe it's the temper that flares too quickly, the habit of procrastination, or the fear that whispers you're not ready. The Stoics wouldn't judge those flaws. They'd ask, what's your next chisel stroke? Not the grand plan to overhaul everything at once, but the small, deliberate act, choosing patience over irritation today, tackling one task without distraction tomorrow. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one, not eventually, now, in the next breath." Here's the secret hidden in those half-carved blocks. They're not incomplete. They're alive. Unlike finished statues frozen in time, they pulse with possibility. Every mark of the chisel is a choice, a decision to keep shaping rather than settling. Seneca, who compared life to a block of wax we mold daily, warned, "It's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." The unfinished sculptures defy that waste. They dare us to ask, what might emerge if you stopped waiting for inspiration and simply began? So pick up your tools, not tomorrow, not when conditions are perfect, but today, amid the mess and noise. Your raw edges aren't proof of failure, they're evidence of courage, because here's the truth no finished statue can teach. The beauty isn't in the final form. It's in the brave, imperfect act of becoming. Even warriors in stone don't always fight. Look at the dying Gaul, his shield resting beside him, or the Ludovisi Ares, seated with one arm draped casually over his weapon. These figures aren't frozen in battle, they're paused, deliberate, conserving their strength for what truly demands it. That's the Stoic art of discernment. Resilience isn't about endless engagement, but knowing when to raise your shield and when to lay it down. Seneca put it bluntly, bravery isn't lack of fear, but acting despite it. And sometimes the bravest act is choosing not to act. to let the trivial skirmishes pass so you're ready for the wars that matter. Consider modern cancel culture, where every minor offense becomes a battlefield. The Stoics would have recognized this as Missi en Abyme, a hall of mirrors where outrage multiplies until it drowns out reason. Contrast that with Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire yet wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike your enemy." He didn't mean passive surrender, he meant strategic disengagement. Like a statue's shield, sometimes the strongest boundary is the one you don't raise, not because you can't, but because you've chosen where your energy belongs. Think of a time you bit back a retort, walked away from an online spat, or let an unfair comment dissolve unanswered. That wasn't weakness, it was selective resilience. The Stoics called this eustatheia, the art of standing firm without being drawn into every storm. Imagine your attention as a fortress. You wouldn't man every wall at once. You'd station guards where breaches are most likely. The rest, you'd let the gates stand open, unthreatened by what doesn't deserve your defense. Here's the challenge these shielded statues pose. What's worth shielding your peace for? Not every slight requires armor. Not every battle deserves your presence. Like the Ludovisi Ares, you can sit with your weapon at rest, not because you've forgotten how to fight, but because you've remembered how to choose. The marble warriors know this truth. A shield's shadow isn't just protection. It's a map of what you've decided to protect. No sandals, just skin meeting earth. Look at the soles of ancient statues pressed flat against marble bases, toes curling slightly as if feeling the texture of real ground beneath them. These unshod feet aren't an artistic oversight, they're a philosophical statement. The Stoics called this anageia, the practice of seeing reality without embellishment, of standing bare before truth. Epictetus, who walked the dusty roads of Greece with nothing but a staff and a cloak, put it plainly: first say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. In other words, transformation begins when you stop pretending, when you strip away the mental sandals that cushion you from life's rough edges. Consider how we navigate the modern world, socked in synthetic comfort, scrolling through curated versions of other people's lives, buffered by notifications that keep us hovering above reality like ghosts. Digital escapism isn't just distraction, it's disconnection. The statues with their grounded feet offer an antidote. Presence isn't about grand gestures. It's about the weight of your attention meeting the world as it is, not as you wish it to be. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane." And what's more insane than living in a world of abstractions while your actual life unfolds unnoticed? Think of the last time you truly felt something: the sting of rain on your face, the grip of soil under your fingernails, the unedited silence of an unplugged moment. The Stoics would call that prosoch attention as a sacred act, like the boxer at rest whose bare feet anchor him even in exhaustion, or the crouching Venus, whose toes dig into stone as she wrings water from her hair. These figures model a radical idea: strength isn't found in avoidance. It's found in contact. So where do you need to feel the ground more? Is it in conversations you've been skimming instead of savoring? In emotions you've numbed with busyness? In the quiet truth you've buried under layers of fine? The statues don't just stand barefoot, they stand awake. Their toes grip the earth not because it's smooth, but because it's solid. And that's the invitation they extend across centuries. Take off your shoes. The world you've been avoiding might just be the one that holds you up. Some statues look away. What are you ignoring? The averted gaze of a classical bust isn't accidental. It's a masterclass in focus. Take the Farnese Hercules, his head turned slightly from his labors, or the Apollo Soroktonos, glancing away from the lizard he's about to strike. These aren't poses of disinterest, they're demonstrations of prosoph, the Stoic practice of directing attention like a spotlight, illuminating only what matters. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly, if you seek tranquility, do less, not nothing, just less of what scatters your energy. The statues model this with their selective vision, reminding us that mastery isn't about seeing everything, but seeing through everything to the heart of what's essential. Consider our modern avalanche of input notifications, news cycles, opinions masquerading as facts. The Stoics would call this peritrope, the dizzying whirl of distractions that leaves us exhausted but unfocused. Contrast that with the Medici Venus, her gaze turned inward, or the sleeping Ariadne, her face tilted away from the world's chaos. They embody a radical idea. Tranquility isn't found in consuming more, but in curating fiercely. Seneca warned, to be everywhere is to be nowhere. These statues, frozen in their deliberate inattention, are his words carved in stone. Think of the last time you truly concentrated. Not skimmed, not multitasked, but immersed. Maybe it was a conversation where you listened without mentally drafting your reply, or a task that absorbed you so completely time dissolved. That's the power these averted eyes hold. They remind us that depth requires exclusion. When Epictetus taught, it's impossible to learn that which you think you already know, he wasn't just talking about humility, he was diagnosing our addiction to surface-level noise. So here's the challenge. What's your lizard? Not the petty distractions you chase, but the vital target just beyond them. The work that matters, the relationships that nourish, the silence that restores. The statues don't just turn away, they turn toward something. Their lesson isn't retreat but recalibration, because sometimes the most profound focus begins with what you refuse to see. Tears in stone don't run, they gleam. Look closely at the face of the dying Gaul, his brow furrowed, his lips parted in a silent exhale. There's no sob, no dramatic collapse, just a single, unspilled tear carved with such precision it seems to catch the light. That's the Stoic paradox of grief, sorrow acknowledged yet dignified. Seneca, who buried his own son, wrote, "Let tears flow, but let them also cease." Not as repression, but as reverence for the pain, yes, but also for the life that continues around it. These statues don't deny suffering, they refuse to let it define them. Consider the difference between public and private sorrow. Modern culture often demands performative grief, outpouring for the camera, anguish measured in likes and shares. But the Stoics knew better. They understood that mourning, like marble, has its own integrity. The Piet shows Mary cradling her son, her face a study in restrained devastation. Her fingers don't clutch, they cradle. Her eyes aren't wild, they're weighted with a quiet, unshakable love. That's the heart of Eustothia, steadiness in the storm. Not because the storm isn't real, but because you are. Now, think of your own losses, the ones that hollowed you out, the ones you still carry like smooth stones in your pocket. How do you honor them without being consumed? The Stoics would say, grieve fully, but don't let grief become your architecture. Like the Laocoon writhing in the grip of serpents, his agony is undeniable, yet his muscles strain forward, not inward. Even in torment, his body speaks of motion, of a will to endure. That's the lesson in stone. Pain isn't erased by ignoring it, but by moving with it, through it, until it becomes part of your stride. Here's the challenge these tearless tears pose. Sorrow isn't the enemy of strength. It's the whetstone. Marcus Aurelius, who buried 8 children, wrote, "The obstacle becomes the way." The statues whisper it too, not in words but in the set of a jaw, the slope of a shoulder, the way their stillness holds space for both loss and life. So when grief comes, let it, but remember, you are the sculptor, not the stone, and every chisel mark, however deep, is shaping something that will stand. Some marble palms are yours. Look at the Aphrodite of Knidos, her hand extended not to take, but to give, her fingers relaxed in perpetual offering. This isn't just artistic grace, it's Stoic philosophy carved in stone. The ancients called this philanthropia, not charity as obligation, but generosity as the natural expression of strength. Seneca, who gave away his fortune, wrote, "What wisdom can you have without sharing?" These open-handed statues answer silently, none. Their gestures aren't signs of depletion, but of abundance, proof that the more you pour out, the more you become. Consider the Tiber Muse, her palm upturned as if cradling an invisible gift. Now contrast that with modern hoarding, not just of possessions, but of time, attention, even praise. We cling to resources as if scarcity defines the world, when the Stoics knew better. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire, still wrote, "What's mine is yours if you need it." Not as grandiosity, but as geometry, life expands when you stop treating it like a zero-sum game. The marble hands teach this in their quiet way. Giving isn't loss, it's reciprocity with the universe itself. Think of the last time you withheld something small, a compliment bitten back, a door held closed instead of open. What fear drove that? The Stoics would call it pleonexia, the delusion that grasping more makes you secure. But the Aphrodite's open palm whispers the opposite. True security lies in knowing you'll always have enough to share. Epictetus, who owned nothing but a wooden bowl, laughed when it was stolen, replacing it with clay. His lesson: containers matter less than what they carry. So here's the challenge these stone gestures pose. What can you offer without ledger or expectation? Not grand donations, but the daily currencies of humanity. Your patience with a struggling coworker, your silence when someone needs to be heard, your willingness to let another take the credit. The statues don't record their gifts, they simply extend them, and in that extension they model the deepest Stoic truth. Generosity isn't something you do. It's someone you become. Victory's wreath wasn't just handed out. Look at the laurels adorning the brows of ancient statues, those delicate leaves woven into crowns, resting lightly yet meaningfully atop the heads of poets, athletes, and emperors. These weren't decorations, they were declarations. Every leaf represented a standard met, a challenge overcome, a virtue tested and proven. The Stoics called this axia worth measured not by applause, but by the integrity of the effort. Epictetus, born into slavery and crippled by his master, knew the difference between earned honor and empty acclaim. It's not what happens, but how you take it. In other words, the true crown isn't placed on your head by others. It's grown from the choices you cultivate day by day. Consider the modern obsession with viral fame, overnight sensations celebrated for 15 minutes of spectacle. Their laurels wilted before they're even worn. Contrast that with the sculptor's chisel, blunted by years of patient strikes, or the philosopher's ink-stained fingers, proof of midnight spent refining thought into wisdom. The statues wearing those leaf crowns whisper a truth we've forgotten. Merit isn't manufactured in a moment. It's the residue of persistence. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled Rome at its zenith, still wrote in his private journal, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be." Be one. His crown wasn't the imperial diadem. It was the quiet discipline of showing up uncounted times when no one was watching. Now, think of the last time you attempted to chase recognition over growth. Maybe it was tailoring a social media post for likes rather than truth, or sidelining a meaningful project because it wouldn't perform. The Stoics would call this kenodoxia, the hollow pursuit of empty praise. The laurels in stone teach us another way. Like the Apollo Belvedere, whose wreath rests lightly on his curls, they model a radical idea. Honor isn't taken, it's bestowed by your own hands through your own standards. Seneca, who watched Nero's court scramble for trinkets of favor, warned, "A man's worth is no greater than his ambitions. What ambitions are you crowning?" Here's the challenge these leafy diadems pose. What have you truly earned, not in likes, not in titles, but in the quiet currency of effort? The sculptor doesn't ask the marble for applause. The marble asks the sculptor for patience. The poet doesn't demand the laurel awaits the poem. So next time you're tempted to measure your worth by the world's scales, remember the Stoic secret hidden in those stone-woven leaves. The only crown that matters is the one you grow yourself, one honest choice at a time. Even shattered words can teach. Look at the broken tablets in museums, those fragments of ancient inscriptions, their messages interrupted by time's cruelty. Half a sentence here, a lone character there, the rest lost to history. And yet, these fractured texts still pulse with meaning. They embody the Stoic truth that wisdom isn't found in completeness, but in the willingness to keep deciphering. Marcus Aurelius, who filled his private journals with self-doubt as much as insight, wrote, "To live each day as if it were your last, without frenzy, without apathy, without pretense." That's the humility of the broken tablet. It doesn't claim to have all the answers, only the courage to keep asking. Consider the difference between dogma and curiosity. One insists on finality, slamming the book shut. The other thrives in the margins, scribbling questions between the lines. The Stoics chose the latter. When Epictetus said, "It's impossible to learn what you think you already know," he wasn't just warning against arrogance, he was celebrating the beauty of the unfinished. Like those fractured inscriptions, our understanding is always partial, always evolving. The real danger isn't in being wrong, it's in clinging to a version of right that's too small to grow with you. Think of the beliefs you've outgrown, the political certainties that now feel naive, the relationships you once thought were forever, the career paths that narrowed instead of expanded. The Stoics would call this metanoia, the transformative shift that comes when you stop forcing old pieces to fit a new puzzle. Marcus Aurelius offered a compass for these moments. The best revenge is to be unlike your enemy. In other words, the past doesn't own you. You're free to rewrite your script, even if the tablet is broken. Now, imagine holding one of those ancient fragments. Run your finger along its jagged edge, not as a wound, but as an invitation. What might the missing pieces have said? The Stoics would argue it doesn't matter. What remains is enough, not to have the final word, but to spark the next thought. That's the gift of the incomplete. It leaves room for you to add your voice to the conversation. So the next time you encounter a shattered certainty, don't mourn what's lost. Listen to what's whispering through the cracks. Glue holds history together. What holds you? Walk through any museum's restoration lab, and you'll see them. Fragments of statues pieced back together with painstaking precision, their cracks filled with reversible adhesives, their missing parts sometimes replaced with neutral toned plaster. These repairs aren't attempts to hide damage, they're acts of reverence, a way to honor the whole without erasing the breaks. Seneca, who weathered exile, chronic illness, and political turmoil, wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction." These restored fragments are that truth in 3 dimensions, proof that healing isn't about pretending the fracture never happened, but about integrating it into the story. Take the Laocoon group, its serpent-coiled limbs reassembled from scattered shards. The restorers didn't smooth over the joins, they left them visible, a testament to both the sculpture's survival and its vulnerability. That's the Stoic art of recovery, not erasing scars, but recognizing them as evidence of what you've endured and what you've rebuilt. Modern kintsugi, the Japanese practice of mending broken pottery with gold, embraces this philosophy literally. The breaks aren't weaknesses, they're the strongest part of the piece, illuminated rather than disguised. Now turn that lens inward. What's been repaired in your life but still shines? Maybe it's a relationship that survived betrayal, a career pivot after failure, or simply the quiet courage to keep going when every instinct said to quit. The Stoics would call this anamnesis, not just remembering the past, but reclaiming its lessons without being trapped by them. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled Rome amid plague and war, scribbled in his journal, "The impediment to action advances action." In other words, the breaks themselves become the path forward. Think of the Venus de Milo's missing arms. For centuries, artists tried to reconstruct them holding apples, mirrors, even laurel wreaths. But eventually they stopped, not because the arms couldn't be replaced, but because their absence had become part of her power. That's the alchemy of resilience. What's lost doesn't diminish you, it redefines you. Epictetus, who transformed his brutal enslavement into a philosophy of liberation, put it plainly: don't explain your philosophy, embody it. So here's the challenge these restored fragments pose. Next time you're tempted to hide your mended edges, don't. Trace them with your finger like a restorer's brush. That crack, it's where the light got in. That glue, proof you chose to hold yourself together when falling apart would have been easier. And that shine, it's not in spite of the breaks, it's because of them. These marble teachers never needed words to hold their lessons. Every chipped edge, every weathered gaze, every deliberately open palm, they're all fragments of a language older than philosophy itself, a visual grammar of resilience. The Stoics didn't just write about composure, they carved it into stone. They didn't merely lecture on impermanence, they let time etch its proof into statues left standing in ruins. And when they spoke of inner strength, they shaped figures whose missing limbs somehow made their presence more powerful. That's the paradox these sculptures embody. Perfection isn't the absence of damage, it's the dignity with which you wear it. Think back to the dying Gaul, his body broken but his spirit unyielding, or the Venus de Milo, whose absent arms became a testament to enduring grace. Even the Laocoon, twisted in agony, holds his face in a mask of focus rather than frenzy. These aren't just artistic choices, they're Stoic principles frozen in 3 dimensions. Marcus Aurelius whispered to himself in the dark, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." The statues shout it without sound. They stand as proof that storms don't break you, they reveal what you're made of. Now step back from the museum pedestal and into your own life. Where have you mistaken stillness for surrender or scars for shame? The cracks in your story aren't failures, they're the places where your light leaks through. Like the Belvedere torso, inspiring Michelangelo centuries after its creation, your impact isn't measured by what remains intact, but by what others build from the fragments you leave behind. Marcus Aurelius left us a compass for this very moment. What we do now echoes in eternity, not in grand monuments but in quiet choices, the patience you extend, the anger you transmute, the weight you carry without crumbling. The statues teach us that legacy isn't about carving your name into history. It's about chiseling your character into the present, stroke by deliberate stroke. So the next time you pass a sculpture, whether in a grand gallery or a public square, pause, look closer. That's not just art, it's an invitation to stand like marble, unshaken by chaos, unbroken by time, and utterly, imperfectly alive. Now we'd love to hear which sculpture's lesson resonated most with you. Drop it in the comments because the best classrooms have always been conversation.